Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. Today, we're going to be doing a pretty big deep dive into the Wisconsin governor and Senate elections. Some new polls came out today for both these races that show the Republican Party in a very good spot, especially in the Senate race. But for now, we're going to be talking about the governor race between incumbent Democrat Tony Evers, who won the election in 2018. He's running to serve in a second term. He won back in 2018 by a very slim margin over incumbent Republican Scott Walker. Scott Walker had been in office for a very long time. People were just kind of tired of him, and Tony Evers ran as a pretty moderate, generic Wisconsin Democrat kind of campaign. Managed to get in there and win the election very narrowly. And he's done a pretty poor job, all things considered. His approval rating has been consistently underwater. Especially with COVID, people in Wisconsin have been really fed up with him. And so the Republicans nominated Tim Michels, who is a pretty solid candidate, actually. He was endorsed by Donald Trump, managed to win the Republican primary relatively handily, all things considered, doing very well across the state. And he's now taking on Tony Evers, the Democrat. And you can see here early on, this race seemed like Tony Evers had a pretty slim advantage, with Michels trailing. But recently, Tim Michels has taken a pretty sizable lead and has pretty much began to run with it. There's a poll that came out today from Marquette University that has Evers up 1. But I don't really count that poll. It has a pretty sizable margin of error. And Marquette University has always had a Democratic bias. They overestimate the Democrats in Wisconsin. Every single poll. If you look at this poll from CBS and YouGov, that's an overall pretty accurate pollster. They have it as a dead heat. Data for Progress is a Democrat internal. It has Tim Michels leading by 1. If we come down here, Fabrizio Anzalone and Trafalgar, these are two very accurate pollsters. They have Michels up by 3 and up by 1. And if you look at all these polls here, basically no poll. Only one poll has Tony Evers at 50%, which is horrible for an incumbent governor. I mean, any incumbent politician should be polling at about 50%. A lot of these polls, especially from the more accurate pollsters, such as Trafalgar, such as Emerson, such as CBS News and YouGov, CBS News has a dead heat at 50-50. But other than that, they pretty much have him, let's see, 47, 47, 47, 45. So Tony Evers is really below water, and he's not very well liked. And we're beginning to see Tim Michels start to pull ahead in the average, other than that one poll that came out today, which I don't really count because, like I said, it's from a pollster that usually favors the Democratic Party. Every single other poll has Michels up by about a point or so, and RCP and a lot of other people expect him to continue to gain on his advantage and win by about 4 points or so. I would agree with that. I think he's going to win by about 3 to 4 points. So yeah, Wisconsin is going to get a Republican governor, and Tony Evers is going to lose. But the big story is the Senate race, of course, where incumbent Republican Ron Johnson looked like he might have a tough fight for re-election. A lot of people are saying, like a year ago or so, that Ron Johnson could be in trouble because he doesn't have the best approval rating. He's kind of gone a little bit further right for a swing state like Wisconsin, but yet he is absolutely crushing Mandela Barnes, and that's really just shows you that you have to be careful who you nominate. I know it's kind of thing that Republicans say, when they talk about the elections this year. They say, oh, candidate quality matters, but it definitely matters to the Democratic side, too. And Ron Johnson, despite his, quote-unquote flaws, he is still very well liked in Wisconsin. Ron Johnson is currently leading in the average by about 3 points or so. A recent poll came out from today from Marquette, which, like I just mentioned in the last section, when we talked about the governor race. Marquette usually has a pretty big Democrat bias, and they have Ron Johnson winning by 6 points. CBS and YouGov, pretty accurate, has Ron Johnson up 1. Fox News, which is all over the place, has Johnson up by 5. Data for Progress, a Democrat internal, has Johnson up by 2. The Trafalgar Group has Ron Johnson up by 2. That's usually a pretty accurate pollster in Wisconsin. And Emerson, which is also a pretty accurate pollster, has Ron Johnson up by 4. So Ron Johnson is clearly absolutely crushing Mandela Barnes, and it makes sense when you think about it. Mandela Barnes is probably the worst candidate the Democrats could have put up. This guy is literally like a BLM activist who said some very controversial things about white Wisconsin and abortion as a whole. He's a very progressive candidate, and for a state like Wisconsin, it's just not going to work. And no one expected it to work. I mean, he had a lead early on, but that was because of the crappy polls and whatever. But now that the campaign season actually kicked off, Ron Johnson is just pulling ahead, and I expect him to go on to win this election by a very sizable margin. I think Ron Johnson is going to win re-election by probably 7-8 points at this rate. I think Mandela Barnes is going to get absolutely crushed, and Ron Johnson will remain Wisconsin's senator. So with that, thank you for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe for more.